Hey everyone, welcome to the first Fortuna AMA. We plan to regularly connect with the Fortuna core team of founders and directors to provide direct updates to the community. Thanks to Fortuna for allowing us to host this series. We're
Thank you.
joined by Head of Products, ZT Luan. Hi ZT, could you
Hey.
give a brief introduction of yourself and Fortuna, please?
Sure. I guess first myself, I'm the director of products at Fortuna, but I'm actually doing more than that. I'm also the director of quantitative research and trading at Fortuna. My background was in computer science and financial mathematics. I got my degrees from Yale and the University of Chicago. So I was a classmate of Brian. We were in the same year. And then I spent 6 years in Chicago doing quantitative work. I was a financial engineer for fixed income derivatives, and then I spent some time doing algo trading, and then I was with the OCC as a quant analyst. Yeah, that was my background. And Fortuna, as you may already know, is the first DLT, or decentralized ledger technology-based solution for the OTC global OTC derivatives market. That's a one-sentence description of Fortuna.
Yeah, wonderful. And just a quick question out of curiosity. So you were Brian's classmate at Yale, right?
Yeah.
You have had quite a career since. Did you always stay in touch, or did you kind of run into each other again when Fortuna started becoming a thing?
We kept in touch, but Brian went back to China right after Yale, and I spent 7 more years in the States. So we kept in touch, but we didn't talk like quite often as close friends would. We probably talk like once or twice per month, sometimes even less. But we definitely kept in touch, and we know what each other were doing during the time. And then when he came up with this idea, I definitely was interested, because this was not only blockchain, but it has to do with my quantitative background as well.
Best of both worlds.
Yes, best of both worlds, yes.
Cool. So we'll try and see if we can turn this into a bit of a quick and snappy AMA where we discuss questions that were collected, well, from your community, really. Overall, the series, I think we'll try to host once or twice a month. We'll see how it goes and how many questions people have. And I will keep asking the community for input ahead of time.
More questions.
Exactly. Yeah. So the first a few questions I have are basically around the market that Fortuna is trying to target.
Sure.
First question, anonymously sent in, mentions that China has imposed restrictions for a long time on money leaving China. Do you feel confident that there won't be an issue with Chinese citizens using cryptocurrencies to potentially invest in global products?
That's a great question, and that's a very broad question. You have to attack this question from a few different angles. First, we do have to admit that there's some restriction of, for example, USD leaving the country, right? But the reality is this restriction is not only in China. In other countries has similar restrictions as well. And Fortuna is actually first. Fortuna is targeting the global market. So China is, even though it looks like we're a Chinese team, but the market we're targeting is not only China. In fact, what we're trying to do is start with the places where cryptocurrency are more welcomed, right?
Yeah.
And that's the first perspective. And the second one is even though China has some restrictions, it's actually developing its own sovereign cryptocurrency. So if we would use that, and actually will solve the problem automatically, because China is actually trying to use its sovereign cryptocurrency to open up its overseas market, like the countries on the One Belt One Road initiative. Those countries will probably, I mean, the goal for Chinese government is to encourage those countries to use either RMB or equivalent cryptocurrency by the Central Bank of China to to clear their trades, right? So in the long run, I don't think that would be a problem. In the current situation is that USD leaving the country may have something to do with the trade war, and it's a game between China and the United States right now. So it's and it's a fierce game right now. So I mean, you have to understand the government is doing that for a reason, and with many things installed in that many things that are likely to be installed in the future, like this foreign exchange or this sovereign cryptocurrency thing, these problems will actually go away naturally. So we're not too worried about that. And currently, even if you do trade cryptocurrency in China, there shouldn't be a problem for you, especially in the OTC market, right? Because there are a lot of blockchain companies in China whose assets are in cryptocurrency. And how do they convert that into fiat money? They have their own ways, and those ways are legal in China. So I don't think that would be a problem, even in the near future.
It does kind of automatically give us a very nice lead into the next question, which was asked by Justin, and he was wondering about the kind of timeline and order that you see yourself penetrating certain markets. Of course, you're globally targeted, but as you say, China might be automatically a little bit of a roadmap item, as some of these things you mentioned fall into place, right? So what are the crypto-friendly areas that you target first, and what comes after?
Sure. Actually, the first few places, including Dubai, Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore, those 4 countries. We're actually trying to, we're actively working on acquiring exchange licenses from those 4 countries or areas. And China and the United States are among the most restrictive, so we'll be looking at them later. But I believe when we have a good start, right, it will kind of naturally lead to more acceptance in the other countries or areas in the world.
Yeah, well, that's usually how it goes, right?
Yeah. You first attack the easy problem first, and then once you have some experience, or acknowledgement, then you attack the difficult problems.
And so
that's how our business development works.
Yeah, definitely, you're right. Yeah. But, so for those first 4 countries, are you planning to be able to operate in them all in 2018 still, or how should I view that timeline?
We'll see. We're still working on them. Dubai is probably the most likely one, and New Zealand following the second. The other 2 we're probably looking at 2019. And what's interesting about Fortuna is we only need those. We're not an exchange first, but we need those licenses just to be able to trade or to sell derivatives, our own derivatives. Right. But basically, Fortuna is a marketplace. It's not an exchange. So our customers, which are large institutes who will do trades themselves, are required to have their own licenses. And that actually is the business model we're going after. Yeah. So we may not necessarily need licenses, but it really depends on the individual specific laws of each individual area, right? But most likely we do not really need a license because we are not doing the trading ourselves. We're just a marketplace. We need a license for the marketplace, and whoever is doing the trading will need a license for themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
But most of them are likely already have one.
Yeah.
Because they're large institutes.
And how would that relate to an individual that would want to use the platform?
That's a very good question. So as some of you may know, currently the OTC market does not have, I wouldn't say does not have much, probably doesn't have any retail investors in it. Yeah. Even though the market is large, it's in the hundreds of trillions of dollars, but it's a pretty mature market, especially in the States. and in Europe, most of the participants of the market are large institutes, or at least like prop trading shops, at least. And for example, I can give you an example for a callable bond, which is a fixed income derivative or a swap. The least amount of transaction in the States is about 10 million US dollars. So currently, it has a very high threshold for retail investors, which makes sense because you need a lot of extra work or extra cost to trade those things. For example, you need a good price coder. You need people who with the expertise to doing quantitative research in order to price your derivative, and those may cost probably $500,000. So it doesn't really make sense to trade anything less than 10 million. Right? So, but one goal of Fortuna is interestingly trying to reduce that threshold.
Yeah.
But even with that, for individual investors, they are likely to just be able to buy things that are already on the platform. It's difficult for them to create their own derivative because they may not have the expertise or time and resources to do that. But Fortuna will allow, so one thing Fortuna is trying to do is allow individual investors to actually buy or sell existing contracts on the platform.
Yeah.
So they don't have to create their own.
And by creating, you mean creating custom contracts, right? So they are allowed to write existing derivatives.
Yes, they could.
Yeah.
But the ones they're going to write probably wouldn't be very professional. It wouldn't sell very well, or it will lose them a lot of money.
True.
So to directly answer your question, our main target in the long run, we're still targeting largely large institutes or the current market participants. But our goal is also trying to expand the size of the market for the long tail investors.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, makes sense. I have a question from Luan. He asks if is becoming a key player in the growth of the Chinese risk hedging market an ambition of Fortuna's, and if so, how do you plan to achieve this?
Could you elaborate that question a little bit?
Yeah, so he states that according to the white paper, China occupies 0.5% of the global risk hedging market. Right. So over time, the Chinese risk hedging market is probably likely to grow because, well, relative to their position in other markets or economies, right? This one is very small. And how do you see your position as Fortuna versus the likely growth that China will incur as a risk hedging / derivatives market?
That's a good question. It's actually already more than 0.5% now. I can just give you a simple data. The OTC options market in China has exploded last year. It has grown more than 10 times from 2016. So it's already gaining traction. And our goal is to provide, as I said, is to provide a marketplace for OTC market. And the key advantage of Fortuna in Chinese market is to reduce intermediaries like brokers. And as you know, in China, for example, I have friends who are the OTC option brokers, and they take 5 to 7% of each trade, and that's kind of outrageous. But considering how much work they're doing, it actually makes some sense because when you do OTC derivatives, you have to do your due diligence, right? You have to know your counterparty. You have to understand them and analyze their financial reliability, and you have to get the resources to do all the work. You've probably seen that in our white paper. The process of trading an OTC option in China and globally actually takes more than 7 steps, and each step involves some manual work. So there's a lot of extra work involved, not to mention the value adjustments that's added to the as a cost for the collaterals to trade derivatives OTC, and that's exactly what Fortuna is targeting at. And people, institutes in China are already complaining about this hectic cost of OTC market, and I believe Fortuna is actually a perfect solution for that. And the word decentralization, I mean, it has a different meaning. It actually leads to brokerage, where
take out the middleman.
Take out the middleman, de-intermediary.
Disintermediate.
Right? Disintermediate, whatever. Whatever the word is.
We know what we mean.
So that's the key advantage of Fortuna. And it's a blockchain. It solves a lot of problems automatically, like risks, like credit risk.
I understand. I like that you're kind of a blockchain company in the second place, right? And firstly, very much kind of a OTC derivatives company, much more of a financial company that found blockchain to be a very suitable technology rather than vice versa.
Blockchain is actually, you can consider blockchain as a base technology. It can be applied in many different areas. And finance is one of the natural application or use case for blockchain technology, because people consider blockchain as an internet of values, right? Instead of transferring data or information which can be duplicated, we're actually transferring value or money. The first application of blockchain is Bitcoin, which is to transfer money or payment, right? So that's finance, and we just found that blockchain is a perfect solution to the problems in the OTC market. And OTC market is a peer-to-peer market as well, which is also very analogous to blockchain, right? Blockchain is kind of P2P as well.
Makes a lot of sense. So I have a few questions that dive a bit more into the actual product.
Sure.
I have a question by, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, but Jelly Quiche. He asks if you could talk a little bit about your plans regarding product offerings. So are you planning to offer traditional non-binary options for contracts beyond cryptocurrencies, such as US and Asian stocks, indexes, or other traditional assets?
It's also a very good question. And the answer, actually, we need to divide this question into two perspectives. First, we are actually a marketplace, as I said. So we provide the structured smart contract system on blockchain for market participants to use. So whatever derivative they are interested in selling or buying are completely up to them. So if they want to sell an option on Asian stock, sure, they can. If they want to do swap trading, they can as well. If they want to do futures or forward, or even callable or puttable bonds, that's completely up to them, as long as they have the expertise and resources to code the structured smart contract on our platform, and they have the financial resources to hedge their position and make money, or likely make money statistically, right? Then they can do that. And this is the first half of the answer. The second half of the answer is actually what Fortuna will do, since we do have our own quant team and we have our own traders as well. So we will offer some of our own products. And this will, currently it will only be on cryptocurrency, but we'll have to see what type of resources we get, because we may get into stock option or commodity futures, but it all depends on the resources that we will hire, or the human resources we will hire, or the other resources we will gain in the future, and how much profitability and how much time we have, right? Because our focus is still on the mainnet itself and the marketplace. So if there's a conflict between building a user-friendly platform versus offering a lot of different types of derivatives our own, then we'll definitely choose the former. But if we expand, we will definitely have our dedicated teams that will develop and trade derivatives, and it will actually depend on their expertise. If this guy is really good at trading, say, U.S. equity options, then well, we'll let that team offer U.S. equity options. But this question actually is not as important as this perspective is not as important as the first aspect, which is that we're creating a platform. So whoever is using the platform has the option to offer any type of derivatives as long as they have those resources and time and expertise to do so, right?
Makes a lot of sense. On your platform, will everything be quoted in FOTA, Fortuna's own currency, or will you support direct pairs like Ether versus Bitcoin?
The short answer is we support all sorts of cryptocurrency as currencies on our platform. So not just FOTA, but with the flexibility of the structured smart contract, you can definitely create derivative contracts using FOTA as the currency. Yeah. But it's not required. FOTA has other uses besides using us as a currency on the platform. But as a cryptocurrency, any cryptocurrency can be used as a currency on the platform. But this may require side chains, and this will be on our roadmap. Yeah. Probably next year.
You mentioned other uses outside of quoting directly. Could you share a little bit around the other uses for the FOTA currency?
Sure. I'll just give you two straightforward examples. Yep. The nodes on our platform have different roles, right? For example, we have price quoters for the underlying asset. We also have arbitrators, and price quoters and arbitrators can also form their cooperation or syndicates. And what makes them want to provide quotes or provide arbitration services? Well, there got to be some incentive, and FOTA is that incentive. So besides actual trading, the other services provided on the platform will be purchased using FOTA.
Yeah. So it has functionality, technically on the platform, underlying kind of core functionality required for the OTC derivatives process, and adjacently, of course, it holds some value as a currency as well, right? In a very crude summary.
Yes, definitely, yes. You can actually go completely without FOTA if you want. If you want to provide your own code, if you are a large institute that does the entire process on your own, then you don't have to give any other players in the market on the platform any incentive. You can just do everything on your own. If that's your choice, then sure, you don't have to. There's no FOTA involved in that case. But most people will find that inefficient because different corporates have their expertise, right? You might be a good option trader, but you might not be a good arbitrator, right? Yeah. It's really up to the user or the client of the platform what they would like to do.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. I have another question for you, and this one's a bit of a long one, so I'll try and get through it in a very concise way, but otherwise we'll have to take a break here and there.
Okay.
Anonymously sent in again. I read China has established regulations on OTC futures companies satisfying the following three standards. First of all, they need to have access to cash flows. Secondly, they need to sell standardized contracts. And finally, they need to introduce bidding mechanisms in contract creation. Looking at Fortuna as a decentralized OTC market with peer-to-peer transactions, etc., is Fortuna satisfying these regulations of an OTC futures company in China?
Actually, that's also a very good question. You got very professional and good questions today.
We'll make it very easy next time.
Oh no! Don't make it easy.
No,
I like hard questions. the short answer is actually Fortuna doesn't satisfy any of those three conditions. First, we're not those conditions are like futures exchanges.
Right.
So like centralized future exchanges, and Fortuna is not an exchange; it's a marketplace, and it's decentralized. So it doesn't really satisfy any of those. It doesn't have access to the cash flow of the traders or the the players, the participants of the market. Your assets or margins are actually locked in the smart contract, right? And you wrote your own smart contract. We cannot grab your money, right? and run, right? And this security is being regulated or being watched by the entire net, right? Because it's a decentralized system, or at least by the delegated nodes, which will definitely not be us. Maybe one of them will be us, but I'm not sure. But if nobody will vote for us, then we will not be one of the delegators. So we're not able to access the cash flow involved in trading, and we don't sell standard contracts. First, we don't sell contracts. We do sell our own contracts, but when you're involved in a trading activity, if the counterparty is not us, then it's not us who are selling the contract. Also, flexibility is one of the problems that Fortuna is trying to attack. This is why the smart contract system, the smart contract hierarchy actually exists on the Fortuna platform, because we want to have non-standardized contracts, because different people have different needs. And this is exactly the OTC market. The OTC market, all the contracts in the OTC market are non-standardized, or at least 90% or 99%. Because the reason for people getting involved in the OTC market is they have their specific hedging or speculation needs. If they want to just buy standard contract, then they can just go on an exchange, right? They can just go on CME. They don't need the OTC market. But the fact is the OTC market is larger than the exchange market. Actually tells us there are a lot of needs for people to trade customized contracts. And the third, what was the third? Bidding mechanism, is that right?
Bidding mechanisms,
Right. As I said, we're not exchange, so we don't have bidding mechanisms. Yeah.
Makes sense. So you already mentioned the smart contracts, and I think in most cases, so for example, if you try to ensure that payments are enforced or margin calls and these type of things, that should all be embedded in the smart contract, right? So people have to kind of sufficiently capitalize their derivative of choice, and then the smart contract ensures that things are handled according to the deal that was struck. However, whenever people deal with people, there will be a dispute at some point. Will Fortuna have a role in arbitrating this, or how should I view this?
Actually, I partially answered this a few minutes ago. So the answer is Fortuna will not be arbitrating this, but dedicated arbitrator nodes will. And for example, when you have a dispute, right? I mean, even with smart contract, you can still have dispute because it's human beings who are doing the trade, even though it's code. And code may have bugs as well. I mean, depending on the developers of the trader. I mean, the trader will have to code their own smart contract. So there might be problems with that. And even though we're offering services, we're actually, this is a, I shouldn't really talk about this, but we're actually offering, we will be offering services to check your the validity of your smart contract. And we're actually cooperating with Certic. So, because actually Professor Xiao at Certic used to be my professor at Yale. So
nice.
Yeah, we have some. This is totally unrelated to your question, but just as a side note. The dispute will be handled by the arbitrators. So how the process works is once you disagree with some settlement of a contract, right? You can apply. You can start a process of application for arbitration. And you can choose any arbitrator on the chain,
Right.
or arbitration corporation on the chain,
Yeah.
and with your application you have to put some quota, right, as an incentive for them to do the arbitration, and they will provide professional arbitration service for you, and eventually. Basically that's just how it works.
And do you offer it to a specific arbitration node, or do you kind of put your arbitration request out in the marketplace for any arbitrator node to accept?
Both works. Okay. You can choose your own arbitrator node, or a consortium of arbitrator node.
Right.
Or you can just put your arbitration on the marketplace, and arbitrators who think they are qualified to arbitrate will pick up your contract. But mostly people will apply for an arbitration for a specific node.
Yeah.
Because they have to put their price with the application. They have to put some quota in it as well. And if you just put your request on a marketplace, then it may take a very long time for people to pick up your application. But there are choices. There will be choices.
Makes sense. So a little bit more in the market making space. So we already briefly touched on market making, but when a market maker is working on a particular derivative, or maybe even on a peer-to-peer transaction, does the platform allow for negotiation, or is any kind of derivative basically take it or leave it without kind of knowing who's writing it, or kind of other forms of negotiation?
Negotiation. So first, market makers are more for the exchange market, but there are market makers for the OTC market, but the definition is a little bit different.
Right.
For market maker in between the two markets. And I guess your question, correct me if I'm wrong. I understand this question as how the two counterparties of a trade, for example, communicate with each other, right? Because they want to have their customized contract, right?
Yeah.
Is that the question? What the question is about?
Yeah. That's okay. That's the essence, right? Yeah.
Okay. So actually, we'll provide a chat box, not a chat box, a chatting platform, like the one you use on Bloomberg. You can talk to, instead of talking to Bloomberg custom representative on Fortuna, you will talk to each other. But your identity, your real life identity, could be hidden if you do not want to review them. Of course, if you want to review them, then nobody can prevent you from doing that. But the default setting is you can remain anonymous, but you can still communicate with each other and understand what each other's needs are, and how the smart contract should be structured, and all those sort of things before you're actually doing the trade. It may make sense if the trade is large. You don't want to just go ahead and do it, right? And enter into a trade, right? Click of a button, right? Exactly. So we will provide a chatting service on the chain, and also decentralized.
And so this could lead to some form of negotiation as well, right? Of course, communication, but also, for example, hey, I like what you're writing, but I want to change the strike date, for example. This type of communication is possible.
Right, definitely.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. I have a few questions around kind of the Fortuna consensus mechanisms, and I think we should... basically as a brief introduction on, what's referenced as DEPOSA, Delegated Proof of Stake / activity, which is a mechanism that runs consensus through, 101 delegates, according to the white paper, based on either their stake or their level of activity, right? I think that's that's a very brief summary. And this is quite a novel way of approaching consensus. And of course, this leads to a few questions.
Sure.
First question I have is by Nicholas A. He says, in your white paper, you state that the POSA will elect 101 delegates to reach agreement on the block generation sequence. What do you mean by a round of elected delegates, and how long will a round be?
Okay. To answer this question, let me just go through the entire process, and it will automatically answer all the questions. So how it works is how people vote. Well, there will be a mechanism for you to vote, just like in EOS, right? You will have in the node or in the node or in the application that you download, you can vote for a node. There will be a sort of a app for that, or a UI for that, right?
Yeah.
User interface for that. And once you choose which node you're going to vote for, it stays there until you change it.
Right.
So it's not like I vote every year for a different delegate.
Right.
You can actually vote at any time you want, as long as you want to change your previous vote. Or you can choose not to vote at all, and you will have no vote. But once you choose a vote, it will stay there forever until you change it or cancel it.
So you're basically staking your vote with a certain delegate, right? So until you change it, it remains with them.
Yes. So, you can either change it or you can cancel it. If you don't want to vote for anyone, you can cancel all your votes, and you have 0 vote in there. Right. And how much votes you have depends on how much voter you have, right?
Yeah.
So that's DPoS, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And
And so so let's say we have our active council of 101 delegates, right? And they're performing the steps required to maintain consensus on the platform. And all of a sudden, a few votes shift, and number 101 needs to fall off the council, and another person or another party needs to enter, right? So, but of course,
does that work?
Someone is still performing services, right, at that point in time. Right. So how do you switch?
That's a great question. Once we choose 101 delegates, we'll make sure each one of them will create a block.
Right.
So the new vote will take effect after all of them have generated a block. So this will take about 16 minutes with our current algorithm. We're actually trying to improve our TPS, but our testnet will have 10 seconds for a block, and 101 times 10 divided by 60 is probably something like 16 minutes. So we'll make sure once they are elected, they will they are guaranteed to generate a block. And so during this time, if any vote changes, then those new votes or new weights will take effect in the next round, which will also create 101 blocks. So that's how it works.
Right. So you could be ousted almost every 16 minutes, really. So
exactly. Yes. You could.
Nice. No, I like it. In the white paper, you also state that delegates are rewarded with FOTA.
Right.
And Nicholas A. Has a second question. He's wondering where does this FOTA come from? Are these delegates rewarded through company reserves? Is it completely new FOTA? How does this work?
In short, they will be rewarded with completely new FOTA. So 1% of new FOTA, actually it's in the white paper, it says 1% of new FOTA will be generated each year for the delegates to provide incentive for the delegates. So that's in short, that's how it works.
And that is on top of your 1 billion current supply?
Yes, that's on top of that.
1% every year?
Yeah, 1% every year.
And is it compound or?
That's a good question. Actually, I do not know the answer to that question.
That's okay.
That's a really good question. Yeah.
I'm just thinking 70 years into the future to see.
Exactly, 70 years, so it will be doubled, right?
Yeah.
Well, even if it's compound, right? 1.01 to the 7th power is 2, yes. So if it's compound, it takes 7 years to double. If it's not compound, it takes 100 years to double.
Yeah.
So
Well, 1.1 to the 7th is double, but it's 1.01, right? So it'll take much longer than 7 years to double compound.
70 years. 70
yeah,
years.
70, yeah.
Yeah, 70 years. Yeah, this is just a little math trick with log. Yeah, because log E2 is 0.7.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a quant. I know my stuff. Right?
Yeah, this is as far as I go, but I still know this.
Yeah. So it takes 70 years versus 100 years for the total supply to double. I guess within 70 years we'll definitely figure out. We'll definitely figure out within 1 year. We'll definitely figure out before our mainnet is online.
Yeah, because ultimately you have until a year after launch to see if it's static or compound, right?
Right.
Because that's when it starts to change.
I'm sure our CTO already has the answer.
Yeah.
Even though I'm kind of a technical guy. Yeah.
No, makes a lot of sense. So the Deposa consensus algorithm basically consists of a number of nodes, right, that perform these functionalities. So I have a question anonymously sent in again, whether we should view these nodes as kind of master nodes in the typical and other systems, and if they are similar, how much photo would you need to stake to become one of these nodes?
Actually, we will not have any master nodes. Or to be more precise, actually, we'll have one sort of like master node, which is a service that Fortuna will provide on our own. Yeah. We will actually have our own node, which will have the complete ledger, and we'll make sure the node is up 24/7.
Right.
And so people can go into the system from our node if they choose to, if they trust us, or anyone can claim they are a master node by not doing anything. They can just say, "Hey, I have the complete ledger. If you trust me, you can connect through the you can connect to the blockchain through my node." But it's just about whether people actually buy that or not, right? You don't have to have any photo to say that. But I would say most likely people, if people would like to connect through a master node, they'll probably connect through our master node.
Yeah.
But it's not required. So we don't have a concept of master node really. And our own node is just to try to provide some free service to our users to provide a stable full ledger.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
So we talked about the quoter nodes or arbitrator nodes, and these can be represented by individuals or probably parties or institutions.
Yeah.
Are they required to stake anything to become one, or is it just based on the votes they get?
Stake anything in order to do what?
Well, so for example, if I want to become a quoter node, of course I need some kind of trust from the community or platform, but you might also require me to hold, I don't know, 100,000 FOTA, for example, or any type of additional requirements to becoming a node, basically.
No, there will be no requirement. But how coder? It's an interesting question. How coding work? It's not, hey, I say this thing is worth 10,000. Let's say BTC worth $7,000 at the end of the expiration of the contract, right? It doesn't work like that. No. You actually will have all the coders.
Yeah.
A lot of coders, and all the that's one dimension, right? All the coders.
Yeah.
And the other dimension is all the underlying assets.
Yeah.
And this forms a matrix, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll do a mathematical analysis on the matrix. Basically, we'll do a decomposition of the matrix to determine the eigenvalues, and which will in turn determine which prices are most precise given the information that we know. And that will actually determine which coder actually is the closest. So it's not like I can arbitrarily give a code. and then people will buy it. It's not, it doesn't work like that. Yeah.
And do
Yeah.
you,
And
because basically to translate what you just say a little bit into layman terms is, for example, let's say 100 quoter nodes, they give 100 values of what they think BTC is worth,
right.
and then this will form, well, a kind of some kind of well, either
Or you
standard
can just say,
deviation or bell curve or kind of something that looks like that, and then you have a kind of true price in the end, and then the quoters that were closest, are they rewarded the most, or how
yes,
should I view
exactly.
this?
Yes.
Yeah,
They
and
will be rewarded the most. Yes.
yeah, and then we might
And
have quoters that are off by more than 2 or 3 sigma, for example. Do these drop out of the quoter node system over time? Are these replaced, or how does that work?
well, first, well, the mathematics is not a distribution. It's
Right.
a
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
matrix
Yeah. Yeah.
matrix
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
decomposition.
Yeah.
It's a different thing, but it's actually more accurate than distribution.
Yeah.
But let's just say it's a black box. So magically,
Yeah.
using some mathematic tool, you can determine which price is the best. And coders will be rewarded based on how close they are to the price, to the best price, right? Secondly, the difference between any coder's code and that price will be recorded. So
Yeah.
basically, it's like a credit score for coders. So if you most likely provide precise codes, then you will be a trusted coder,
Yeah.
and people will trust you, or a coding corporation, and people will trust you, and you're more likely to get to be requested to provide code. So that's how it works.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. Another functionality that you will offer is the Fortuna value locking system, which basically, as I understand it, is when you enter a contract, you, for a small premium, are able to kind of value lock in your Fortuna to prevent kind of additional volatility on the Fortuna price during your contract time.
Yep.
Do you already have an idea of how high the fee will be for FVLS, and will the whole kind of trading experience still be cheaper than traditional platforms using FVLS?
We do. And well, first, I have to give a little bit of background. I mean, if you don't use Fortuna to trade, then you don't have this problem,
Yeah.
right? If you use USDT to trade, or BTC to trade, if you use BTC to trade, then you have to do your hedging on BTC, because BTC will fluctuate as well. If you use other cryptocurrency, then that's well, similarly, right?
Same. Yeah.
We only provide Fortuna price locking service, and it's pretty straightforward. It's just like a forward contract, basically. So the price will just be the price of the forward contract.
Yeah.
And if you consider it, the price locking service is a derivative itself.
Yeah.
So we will just use a typical way to price that derivative, and we'll basically providing the service will be like selling you that derivative. So the fee will be computed quantitatively. Basically, it will just be how much the futures or forward contract will be worth, theoretically. So that's how this thing will work. So how much fee it's gonna cost? I mean, it depends on the inputs of this quantitative model, right? So what's the volatility? What's the price of the current Fortuna versus whatever fiat currency you're targeting at, and a lot of different. What's the interest rates? Those kind of things. So it will just the price will be determined quantitatively using models. So it's not like we set a fixed percentage of premium as our price.
Yeah.
So that's
makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And regarding, I have one more question, also sent in anonymously around valuation nodes, and they were wondering if you will also yourself be using kind of expensive traditional data centers like Bloomberg, or will you kind of see if all the valuation nodes kind of will come to you, or how do you see yourself setting this whole ecosystem up?
I'm assuming valuation is not coding, right? Price coding, right? Valuation is how you price your derivative.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's the question, because we already talked about coding and how that works.
Yeah.
So I guess this is more about how the derivatives themselves are priced.
Yeah.
Coding is providing coding for the underlying asset. So this is a very good question as well. I mean, we don't provide that service. It's usually how the market works. How things work in the OTC market is whoever sells and buys the contract will have their team, their experts doing the valuation. Yeah. So they will do their own valuation. Yeah. I don't even think there will be dedicated nodes to do valuation. There could be, but given how the current market is working in reality, I think most likely the counterparties of a trade will do their own pricing. Yeah.
Exactly. Makes a lot of sense. Well, I think we've drilled you enough on the post handle node structure. I have a few questions around kind of the community and partnership, some of these things. A question by Luan asking how Fortuna engage the open source development community, and are there possibilities for this development community to build useful apps and tools for Fortuna?
Oh, that's a great question. That's probably one of the best questions today. The other questions are also very good. So we will have our main chain, right? Mm-hmm. And the source code will be public, obviously. However, our smart contract system is a structured smart contract system, which is designed specifically for trading OTC derivatives. Yeah. So even though it is we have our main chain like ETH, but our smart contract will not be Turing complete. Right. So you can play with the smart contract however you want, and you can definitely trade derivatives because that's what those are designed for. But if you want to create very creative dApps, then you have to see how much Turing completeness is in our smart contract system. So I'm sure you can create some dApps, but it doesn't necessarily. Well, I'm sure you can create some dApps for finance, right? But if you want to build a CryptoKitty, maybe I'm not sure that will support that.
Yeah,
it's not
maybe not the perfect platform.
Maybe not the perfect platform for a CryptoKitty.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but all these. Sorry, I just want to add one more thing. All the code will be open, so you feel free to play with it and see how much potential our structured smart contract has compared to Turing complete smart contracts.
Yeah, so that puts me on a little bit of a tangent, because I know previously there's been a little bit of caution around things like GitHub or opening things up, because, well, you're basically a first mover in this market, and you need to maintain some level of security. Now, of course, as we are approaching the kind of Black Friday launch, which for reference is Fortuna's kind of single node platform preceding a Q3 mainnet launch. How much of these things will you start opening up? So you'll say, okay, the code will be opened. Should we be expecting this already around the Black Friday timing, or after mainnet, or how should we see or expect
the timeline?
Your GitHub develop and these type of things.
Sure. Our GitHub will be open following the launch of the mainnet. Yeah. So our first Black Friday is a single node system, so we will not share its source code. For the testnet, we will also not share its source code. but the source code of the testnet obviously will be very similar to the mainnet, which will be released in Q3, towards the end of Q3, I'll say. So those things we're actually developing the single node version and the mainnet at the same time. And the single node version will be like a proof of product.
Yeah.
Because besides the chain in itself, I mean, there are a lot of things on top of it.
Factors, right? Yeah, usability,
yes,
etc.
Exactly. So we want to test that. We want to test our front end developers' ability. We want to test our database connection. So this single node, we used to. Our old plan is to just create a prototype, but we changed our plan to make it a actually working platform. But it's single node. But you can still do trade on it. Actually, the first iteration. In the first iteration, you will only be able to purchase some binary options on it.
Yeah, makes sense.
Which will be sold by Fortuna. But of course, that's your choice. You don't have to. You can just play around with the platform and not buy anything.
Exactly.
Basically. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned one of the big benefits of kind of this single node platform. That of course it allows for quite rapid A/B testing, basically iterating your way through certain versions of the product to see what works best. Right. Kind of just go at it in a scientific trial and error fashion almost.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah, but how will the A's and the B's differ? Because are we talking UX, front-end interface, A's and B's, or are we talking back-end as well?
We're talking about everything. So from front-end, from user-friendliness to back-end connection and everything, basically. We'll make sure, the thing we'll make sure is that the products, the initial products we'll sell on this platform will be fair. So they will be fairly valued. Yeah. This is done by our quantitative team, which is my team. But all this other stuff will be like it'll basically like a beta version. You can think of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So if you don't like this, the user interface, well, tell us, right? Yeah. If you think something is slow, well, also tell us, right? Yeah. If something goes wrong, well, definitely tell us.
yeah, of course. But so in practice, so technically, for example, let's say me and a friend, we both get the same version of the interface, so we both get A, but maybe we both have a different database connection, something like that. So we might think we are looking at the same thing, but there's still A/B testing going on in the backend, for example.
You will actually be using the same thing, actually.
Right. Okay.
So we'll make it consistent.
Okay.
Yeah, because you can actually spend money on it. So we'll have to make it consistent, so that you don't have like arbitrage or
between internal versions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we want to make sure, because this is a working version, not a prototype anymore. So the numbers on it are very carefully computed using models. And the things we're trying to test are, for example, how fast it is, right? And are there periods where this thing just gets stuck, or things like that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Both front end and back end.
Makes a lot of sense. Switching a little bit into back into a much more high level domain. I have a few questions around partnerships. Another anonymous question asking, on your website there's mention of large names such as Neo, Qdom, and Loopring. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship to each of them?
To put it simple, this is a simple question. They are our investors, and that's it. Right. We have pretty good relationship with them. Sometimes we talk about technology, but we don't. So since we have our main chain, we're not based on any of those public chains. Yeah. So that's about it. We talk to them as friends, and they are our investors. But we're not really based on them or anything like that. Yeah. So our relationship is about that, right?
Yeah. So sharing best practices is kind of as far as you get, right? Because you're building your own product. Makes a lot of sense. So, and that is a nice segue into kind of my final question in this space. So what kind of partners are you looking for that are important in making Fortuna a success?
Oh, that's a great question. As I said, one of them was Certic.
Yeah, Professor Shao.
Yes, they can actually. We definitely need them because given the size of the OTC market and given the size of each trade, there will definitely be needs or demand for testing smart contracts.
Yeah.
Right. Say I'm a trader. I wrote a smart contract. I may spend a lot of time and effort in it, but I still want to make sure it's valid and it doesn't have too many bugs. And this is exactly what Certic can help us with. So that's one kind of partnership we're looking at, and we will cooperate with them. And the other partnerships, including financial institutes.
Yeah.
And that's what we're actively working on. Basically, business development, right?
Yeah.
We need to find our customers, right?
Yeah.
And it's like how Alibaba started. They didn't have any customers. They have to pitch their customers. They have to go to their factories and tell the owner of the factories to get on their platform.
Yeah.
So,
you should want us. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure if we will do that, but we'll definitely talk to many financial institutes or many trading firms to see if they're interested in our platform. So that's another type of partnership we're looking at, and I think that's about it. But we're also looking for technological partnership, and Certic is one of that. So when we feel that we need something, say we need a coder, and nobody is a coder yet, then we may reach out to people to see if they want to provide code on our platform. So these are the type of partnership we're looking for. Yeah.
Makes sense. I've a few kind of light questions left at the end, and then I think we can start to wrap up. We've gone through a lot already. So can you share a little bit about what your plans are for the coming weeks? Of course, Black Friday is coming up, but are you going out conferencing, or kind of what are your big ticket items for the coming few weeks?
The biggest thing is definitely Black Friday, right? Which will be towards the middle of April.
Yeah.
And Brian and I are going to Beijing next, actually in a week and a half at Yale Beijing Center. There will be a blockchain discussion panel and conference in there, which will have this people called Yao Qian. He is the head of cryptocurrency research center at the Central Bank of China.
Oh wow!
And we have this guy called Li Ming, who is the head of the research facility at China's digital standardization organization. I don't know the English translation of that organization.
But they're looking for standards or kind of some way to.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, they actually create standards for crypto technology. Yeah. And we also have people from Huobi, which is an exchange. Yeah. Right. And Brian and I will also be there, and a lot of Yale alumni. And a lot of entrepreneurs will be there as well. Yeah.
So you might get to see some former classmates as well as talk to everyone that you need.
Sure. Yeah. We'll see. Yeah.
Oh, it should be a very nice event.
Yep.
Great. Well, of course, there's one of the questions that people always want to know, and that is if you can give us a little piece of news, some kind of exclusive little scoop. I know we've talked about Certic a little bit, but is there any kind of little piece of the puzzle you can reveal to us for the next weeks?
For the next few weeks, or in the long run? For the next few
long
weeks.
run, whatever you can reveal.
Whatever I can reveal. It's a tough question. I don't know how much I can reveal. We are. Well, let me just give you a very general little trick, because for the short run, I mean, we have to wait. I mean, there will be things going on, but I cannot review them at this point because they will happen pretty soon, and we have our timeline for that. So I don't want to
jeopardize
ruin
any of that.
yeah, exactly, jeopardize any of, or I don't want to ruin the fun, right?
Exactly.
But as people may know, China is, as I said, China is developing its own cryptocurrency from the central bank.
Yeah.
And that is actually a good sign for Fortuna and for many small countries who have the need to trade derivatives or who have the need to export their good and import Chinese goods. And this is a very good sign for Fortuna, because if we can incorporate that into our system, then we'll automatically have a lot of large institutes in China as our customers. Well, it will take time for this to happen, but we will definitely actively watching this. So that's one thing. That's the only thing I can say.
That's fine. It's already a great sign. It should make people very happy, right?
Yeah. Oh, and okay. I guess one more thing. We are actually getting in touch. We're not really getting in touch. We already talked to them. So as people may know, Brian went to Dubai some time ago, right? Mm-hmm. And we are getting two parallel or two separate tracks in Dubai, and either of them will be will be a good news for Fortuna. We'll either get exchange licenses, or we'll have support from, for example, the DMCC.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something I can say. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for your time, ZT. It was an absolute pleasure interviewing you. Hopefully we can talk again in the future. And I want to, of course, thank everyone in the community that took the time to send in their questions. And I think we'll leave it at that for now, and hopefully reconnect many times again.
Sure. I also want to thank the community, and it was also my pleasure as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.